Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today, choosing to spend your time with Greg Savage and VideoMyJob. As you all know, Greg is a very sought-after speaker. In fact, he's done 15 webinars in the last 15 days, he was just telling me. He's an advisor and board member. In fact, he is one of VideoMyJob's very valued board members. And as anyone who follows the Savage 60 Seconds video series knows, Greg is the master of short, sharp and actionable recruitment advice. Which is why we've asked him here today to share with you some of his business advice on surviving and thriving in a downturn. He's lived through several bumpy economic depressions. And he's got some great advice for everyone. So don't stress about taking notes today. Pretty much everything Greg is sharing can be found in his book, The Savage Truth. I'll pop a link to that in the chat. And just so everyone knows, all of the profits are going to the Australian Bushfire Relief Fund, which is a pretty amazing on the part of Greg. So do your bit for the Bushfire Relief Fund and also do a bit of learning on the way. If you've got questions, you can pop them in the chat or the Q&A. And at the end of Greg's presentation, I will try and get to as many, or we will try and get to as many of those questions as we can. And if you need to drop off, we'll be sending the recording out shortly. So don't worry about dropping off. Right, over to you, Greg.
Thank you very much, Tamara. However, when Tamara says don't worry about dropping off, if you do drop out of my video mid-webinar, an alert comes to me and I'll send the boys around. So don't drop off. That would be outrageous. Please. I want people to concentrate. Let's go. Thank you everyone for joining the video or the webinar. I'm having trouble turning my, there we go. So there's upwards of 800 people on this, so we're going to have to really move fast to get through the material. The first thing I'd like to say is I have a blog. It's called the Savage Crisis Toolbox, and you're going to get a link to it from Tamara after this. And I really bring your attention to this because every item that I've done over this crisis period in the last, say, month, of which there are upwards of 20 articles, webinars, podcasts, explaining everything that I've learned and know about how to deal with the situation is on that page, the links. So please, before you send me a question, and you know, I do get over 100 a day typically, it would be really, really good if you could just see if the answer is there, because it'll be much better for you and for me if we do it that way. Okay, so first of all, let's not pull any punches. We all know we're going through a crisis, but let me just set the scene. I'm not trying to be negative. In fact, the whole thesis of today will be positive, but we need to be very realistic. And the first thing is not to kid yourself. In my view, having been in recruitment for 40 years, this is by far the most serious recruitment crisis. It's far bigger than recruitment, obviously. There's much bigger issues than what's happening in recruitment, happening to people in terms of health. But as far as recruitment's concerned, permanent recruitment has pretty much fallen off the cliff. Temporary and contract in most sectors has declined dramatically, and I believe it's going to get worse. I know in Australia and New Zealand, we've had some little flickers of hope in general life where some of our restrictions have been slightly released. That is not going to flow on to economic activity anytime soon. I think there'll be more job losses in the general community. I think there'll be more job losses in the recruitment community. I think salaries will drop in the general community and also in recruitment. I think your commission structure is likely to change as we come out of this. And I think a recovery will take six to 12 months. I don't know, that's a prediction, and who knows. And by the way, I hope I'm wrong on that. I hope it's much quicker, and please send me an email in 3 months if it's booming. I'll be the most delighted to have been wrong on that, but I don't think so. I also think, and I know that a lot of recruitment agencies will go into liquidation. Many have already. There just isn't enough revenue to support them. And I also think, just to put the cherry on the top of the gloom, before I give you the good news, is that this government support, which has been incredibly helpful. I mean, in Australia, they call it the job keeper, and most countries, well, other countries listening will have different versions of this. it has definitely saved a whole second or third round of redundancy. But if, and God willing, this is not the case, if this crisis goes on longer than 6 months and we can't go back to work, the government support will dry up before the crisis is over. So the reason why I start with that, fairly horrific slap across the chops is that this is going to be the biggest test of your resilience, fortitude, and the desire that you've ever faced. I'm not a great believer in generational differences. I think they've been hyped a lot. Certainly what people say about millennials or Generation X, whatever it is largely not true. They're often the people I work with in that age group are often the most loyal, hardest working people I've worked with in a whole career. But it's true that that generation gets tarred with the brush of lacking resilience. Well, now's your time to prove that that's not true. Because no matter what generation you're in, this is going to be your test. So we're going to talk today about how you're going to get through that test and some tips and tricks, not tricks, that's the wrong word, some strategies to deal with this highly unusual situation. Because while we're going to go into a recession, there's no doubt, we already kind of are, it's not like recessions of the past for the obvious reasons. We're all sitting at home and there are health implications that we've never had to deal with before. So how are recruiters responding? Well, the first thing is, I like to equate, I don't like to, but I've come to equate it to the stages of grieving in life. They talk about when somebody suffers a horrific life event, maybe a death in the family or something awful, they go through stages and the psychologists tell us they are denial, anger, rationalization, despair, and then acceptance. When I talk to recruiters and recruitment company owners particularly, which honestly, I would have had hundreds of those meetings in the last 4 weeks, no exaggeration. Most of them are on some level of that, those 5 stages. And for a long time, a lot of people were in denial. And I heard only up to last week or 2 weeks ago, this won't take long, we'll come through this, we'll bounce through this, it will snap back, all these kinds of rationalizations as well. Then people drift into despair, which particularly after 4 weeks in lockdown, a lot of people predictably lost their mojo around this working from home when we're all at home type of scenario. We need to move to acceptance. And acceptance isn't giving up. Acceptance is accepting that this is the new normal. Acceptance is saying, I'm not going to try and, I've heard this phrase a lot. Hey, I'm just going to sit this out. I'm going to hibernate during this downtime and then pop up again when the market returns. That would be your biggest mistake. This is not the time to hibernate, guys, as a recruiter and also as a human being. This is the time to be visible. This is the time to actually redefine what a productivity is. That's what I mean by acceptance. This is the new normal. I think it will be 6 months, even if we are allowed to go back to work a bit. We're going to have strict, very strict social distancing rules. We're going to have, in this country, the government's already said there'll be no international travel till next year. Well, can you imagine the impact just that's going to have on our economy? Restaurants are not going to open for months. And all of that, you might say, well, I'm not in the restaurant or the travel industry. The point is, these are the sorts of things that drive the economy, which flows onto any industry that you're recruiting in. So we have to redefine what productivity is. And really, the way I'd like to sort of phrase it to you is you need to take charge of your own journey through this shitstorm. You've got to accept that this is the way it is. And what can I now do is your philosophy. I am responsible for it. Everybody in the world, it's one of these unique situations. Everybody in the world is in this situation, pretty much, right? Slight differences from country to country. We're all dealing with it. The one thing you've got control over, you can't control that our government says we've got to stay at home. You can't control what the course of the virus is, etc. Of course you can't, but you can take charge of your own journey. And if your journey currently is looking at the fridge 100 times a day and tidying out your sock drawer for the 100th time and then getting on FaceTime and whinging with your friends about how fat you're getting, if that's your journey, you're missing the opportunity and it's going to set you back career-wise. Because when we come out the other side of this, those people who have taken the right actions are going to benefit. So let's just take a minute to look at how recessions normally play out. I won't spend a lot of time on this. But normally, you have a period of high temp usage and massive perm demand. That's at the high end of the market. Well, that was only 12 months ago. 12 months ago, Australia registered its highest ever demand in the history of record keeping for recruitment agency services. That was less than 12 months ago. Then temp business maintains its volumes while perm business slows. Typically, in our situation, we hit this wall, which was virtually happened in a month, as we all know. And then the low point is perm business virtually stops. Well, that is the case, right? In everyone I speak, not everyone, there's a bit of stuff happening in some niche areas, we know that, but let's just generalize, perm business has stopped. I know plenty of recruitment, I mean, I'm on the board of 15 recruitment companies and HR tech companies, like VideoMyJob, and in most of them, their perm numbers have gone from, 80 open orders to 5 is a typical conversation I'm having. You know this, right? So we've hit that, and then the temp business falls, and I reckon it's fallen 30 to 40% for most companies and continuing to drop because there isn't, as jobs finish, even if the clients have kept those jobs going, they come to an actual end, there isn't the flow of new jobs coming through. So we're at that orange phase there. Now, the good news is, and there is some good news, but most of it's in the future, is that when we see a recovery, you will expect the temp business to rise first. And I think that is what will happen. In this case, companies will be tentative, but there'll be restrictions lifted, there'll be a little bit of demand. But most companies will say, let's try, in many cases, I should say, well, let's try a temp or a contract person first. And then perm comes back and you end up at the high end of the cycle again. So the good news is this. I want to tell you a story about one of the recessions I went to, but I'll leave it to the next slide. The good news is that a recovery will come. It absolutely will come. We've been through recessions before. I've been through 5 or 6. We've also been, by the way, through horrific health issues before in the history of humanity, and we've always come through it, and I think we're beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. So while you've got to do activities that get you through the now, let's also remember that demand will shift, and we need to be well positioned. There'll be a recovery. A lot of people have said that the recovery will be V-shaped. And even our Prime Minister up to a month ago was talking about the economy snapping back. I notice he doesn't say that anymore. What that means is we're going to go into this massive downturn, and then when restrictions are lifted and coronavirus is over, we're going to snap back. I hope so. Oh God, I'd love that, as we all would. But I think it'll be more like a W. I think there'll be flickers and flares of activity, and then perhaps we might have to lock down. It's possible we might have to lock down again. Or a confidence will fade. So I think it'll be like a W, but it will recover. And over time, if it's not a snapback, then over a couple of years, we will get back to very strong growth again. And big opportunities will emerge. This is the thing I need to say. I've been through a lot of recessions, and there is a chance, if you prepare and configure your future, to be better, stronger, and more profitable than ever before. And it will be the making of some individuals. I certainly think the recession in the 90s was the making of me and my company, and set me on a road that was, a good journey, and plenty of people who worked with me at that time. And then the 2001, 2002 tech wreck, they called it. People have forgotten about that recession. That set up some people, and even the GFC, as we call it in this country, the Lehman Brothers thing. So when people who came through that did exceptionally well. So here's the story about Recruitment Solutions. Now, that was a company I founded with other people in 1987. I know it's a long time ago, but don't you worry, the lessons are good. And because that became a publicly listed company, we've got all the data from our revenue, and it's in my book, because there's a good story in the book about the recession and how we got through it, how it was the making of us. But look how in '89 our our revenues were 11 million, and then in '90 was 13 million. Then bang, recession hit. It was the biggest recession till now that I've been through. And our revenues kind of almost halved. We had to let half our staff go. It was the most awful time. But look, it lasted, the next year was no better. Well, a little bit better. Even 3 years later, we'd only got up to 10.2. We were not back to the 13 million. But then, look at the growth of that company. Look at how, and I would never take any satisfaction in the failure of other people. I've owned my own businesses. I've had sleepless nights over the thought of them going bust. But the truth is, in that downturn, 60% of recruitment companies in Australia and New Zealand went bust. And when the economy recovered, there we were, you know, a bit like that Stephen Bradbury, where everyone else fell over and he won the gold medal at the Olympics. There we were. It wasn't quite like that. There were a lot of competitors and they all came back, of course. But look how we grew up to 60 million, I think it was in the end. That company listed on the stock exchange, a great success story. There were other reasons it was well, we had good recruiters, it was well managed, etc. But it was the recession that was the making of that company. Have a look at this. This is now in 2001 to 2004. This is numbers from Aquent, the company I was running. It's only the Sydney office and it's only temporary hours built. But I want to show you how we were tracking along quite nicely. Then there was a downturn. There it is there. And that downturn, as you can see, was maybe a 30% drop in, maybe 20-30% drop in 30%, I think, in temporary hours. It was tough. But look at that growth subsequently. And this is only a 4-year period from beginning to end. Look at that growth in temporary hours. That was the opportunity. That's what we've got to look forward to. But it won't just happen. This graph here and the recruitment solutions graph is not the same for everybody who came through that. We did it well. We did a lot of things not so well, but we did it well. This business grew. Look at it. That's 5 times growth in temporary hours within 4-year period. So there are great opportunities. By the way, I want to make this point to you. You should configure yourself to take advantage of the temporary growth that's going to come. It will come. It will rise first. But remember this, clients will do that out of hesitation. 3 months down the track, 6 months down the track, 12 months down the track, they're going to say to you when their confidence returns, we love your temp, we want to convert them to permanent. Do not discount your temporary to permanent fees. Why would you do that? I know it's almost embedded in the psyche of recruiters, but we've fallen for a 4-card trick. The temps are our assets. The client pays the temporary and the margin is for us finding the temp, managing the temp, paying the on costs, taking the liability, being treated as a bank and paying our temps weekly while the client pays us monthly or longer. That's what the margin's for. There is no bloody arbitrage against the permanent fee. So change your terms of business now. Have conversations with clients that this is a temp, and if you take them on, because I promise you, while the job market is completely fragmented now because of what's happened, the underlying shortage of talent has not gone away. And when the economy recovers, you're going to be desperate for those hard to find talent again. So you don't give away your assets at some discounted rate. Okay, your temp is not a depreciating asset. Clients say that to you, oh, but you've made your money on the temporary thing, so therefore when we go permanent, there's a discount. No, they're 2 different things. And the temp is an appreciating asset. You've had them work for you for a year, or 6 months, or 3 months. You know their capability. You want to take them on permanently? Absolute pleasure. Here's our permanent placement fee. Maybe some 5%, 10% discount if they've been there a year just to show willing, but not these ridiculous free conversions and 75% discounts. Now is the time to recalibrate. People talk about we're going to create the recruitment company of the future coming out of this. Well, only if you make the changes needed to do that. And one of those changes would be putting more value on what we do. Now, I also want to, you know, this is hard, but needs to be said. It's got to be a balance between sort of self-pity and creating outcomes here. We are in a crisis. I know it's difficult. It's more difficult than some for others. And pretty much everybody on this call, it's not as difficult for you as for somebody trying to social distance in the slums of Mumbai or Nairobi or whatever it might be. So whatever bad you think it is for you, I promise you, there's a lot of people worse off. So it's no time for self-indulgence. We should put that behind us. I know it's difficult at home. I know we've lost jobs in some cases. I know income's gone down. I know we're struggling with having everybody around us, all those kinds of things. But you own your response and your contributions coming out. No one's going to do it for you. And so my big message, which I'm now going to go into some tactical details on, is it's time for you to be more visible, not less visible. But you cannot retreat into your cave. It's your time for you now in this, I'm talking about the next 6 months before the recovery comes. It's time to connect and communicate and content create. It really is critical that you engage during this time. I like to say you can configure your own future. You know, I've heard constantly people say, not only in recruitment, but that the coronavirus is going to mean that the world is going to change and people are going to behave differently after this. They will not. I promise you that humanity has muscle memory, and we will go back and do exactly the same things we've done before, unless you make the commitment to make the change, right? Most recruiters will go back and they'll be so grateful to have jobs, they'll go back and do exactly what they've done before. There has never been a better chance than this, where you could go back into this market and say, I only take exclusive job orders, for example. Just as an example. I'd be doing that. Wouldn't take another bloody job in competition again. You can configure your own future. You've got to plan for this recovery, right? As a recruiter and as a recruitment company, there is never a better time to get market share than when this thing recovers. But to do that, you have to connect and engage with people you've not done business with before. That's what market share means. And never would you have a better time. That's such a, if there is a silver lining out of this situation, it's the opportunity to disrupt what's gone before. There's an opportunity for you to refocus your specialization. So, okay, you've been in accounting recruitment, but you've dabbled in junior accounting and permanent senior, and you've done a bit of temp. Well, maybe now's the time to say, you know what? As this comes back, I'm going to own the qualified accounting market. Just as an example, don't go rush out and do that now. I'm asking you to think about, is this an opportunity to get more focused, more specialized? And there might be a great reason to do that. It might also be an opportunity to do the reverse as a company, to consider adjacent verticals. We're in tech, we're in IT. Should we be doing digital marketing? Is now the time to rush into that? It's just an example. By the way, most IT companies that have tried to get into digital marketing have failed. Just take that on board. It's just an example. We're strong in accounting. Should we now add business support? I'm just giving examples off the top of my head. They're not suggestions for strategy. The two things I want to get across about this is, should I get more specialized as an individual or as a company? Or should I also look at opportunity to jump into adjacent verticals? Obviously, target growth industries and growth clients. Do your research. And to do that, you've got to have a lot of conversations with your clients. And mostly our conversations are with mid-level people in companies. There's nothing wrong with that, except that those people are not privy often to the plan. So you've got to go as senior as you can. And that's where owners of recruitment companies and the senior ones, you need to lead here. Our clients are not hiring, but they are configuring their future. They're making plans. They're not fools. They're making plans of how they're going to recover. You need to be inside the tent. You need to be talking to them about what their plans are, so you can predict, obviously, their hiring needs, and you may even be able to build talent pipelines for them. And you may even get them to pay you to do that. Mr. Client, you used to hire 25 developers a year from me or from others prior to this downturn. You've got that on hold for now, but that will come back. Shall I build a pipeline of developer talent with these XYZ skills? And maybe you could pay me for it, or you pay me when you hire them, because that's when you're going to need them. The other thing I'd say, when you think about configuring your future, notice that configuring your future is a proactive act. Don't just say to yourself, well, the market picks up, I'm going to ride that wave. Well, when Recruitment Solutions took off and flew, when Aquin took off and flew, that was because we proactively planned and did certain things. Everyone rises a little bit in a growing market. Some people dominate, and some recruiters dominate. And as a recruiter, if you were a $250,000 a year recruiter prior to this, if you get through this, if you configure your future and make the right decisions, you will leapfrog to a $500,000 a year recruiter. You can. I've seen it countless times, because you'll be toughened, you'll be hardened, you will be hungrier. A lot of your competition would have gone. Your relationships with your clients will be better if you make these planned moves. And you need to think to yourself, we as a recruitment industry and us as individuals need to think to ourselves, what do our clients need? Not, well, we've always sold this, so I'm going to sell it again. What do they need? Maybe they no longer need PAs and EAs. Maybe they now need call center people. Is that a shift? Maybe their business model has shifted from feeding people food in restaurants and they're delivering it at home. This is just something off the top of my head. So maybe I need to place delivery drivers, not waiters. That's not a thing, but it's kind of a good example. If people are going to move to getting food delivered, and this situation is going to, then replace delivery drivers and chefs, but not waiters. It's not actually a suggestion, but it's quite a cool example of how you could think ahead to take advantage of what your clients need. And maybe your clients don't need, always clients have paid us and they will in the future to find them talent they can't find themselves. Well, maybe there's going to be a period of an oversupply of talent. My God, none of you guys, very few of you, have ever worked in a market where there's too much good talent. So maybe our service is now a screening, reference checking service. Maybe we come up with some new product, which we only plan to sell for 6 months in the uptick, which is going to be, you run an ad, Mr. Client, you're going to get 1,000 people. Let me do it for you. I'll screen it down to a long list of 8. And my fee will be slightly different from the placement fee. Maybe. I'm not recommending any one of these examples. I'm recommending configuring your future. And so the recruiter of the future, for a long time, I've been talking about the fact that recruiters need to focus on their relationships and their influencing skills and not become transactional. Well, tell me, which recruiters do you think were the first to be let go in this downturn? They were the transactional recruiters that had no client relationships. As I said, I've been on the board a number of companies, and I've had this conversation 20 times. And yeah, I mean, sometimes some very good recruiters have also had to be stood down. And it's sad for any one of them. No individual deserves it. But it is also true that those who have the relationships will be the ones that secure their future. So, what do you actually need to do? Well, the first thing is you need to go to that COVID toolbox that I've sent you, because it's got 25 articles talking about this. And they're all created in the last 3 weeks, not historical stuff. And it's my ideas, but it's also ideas I've gleaned from other people. And there it is. So for God's sake, please bookmark it and use it. It's actually, remember I said it's about resilience and it's about being proactive. Well, you're actually going to have to do something. Yes, you've come onto this webinar and you're having a nice little listen while you're possibly also playing on your Instagram. That's not going to solve your problem, right? You actually have to do something. And one of the things would be is to go and do a nano degree on working in the COVID period. And there's 3 things you work on. And the first one is the obvious one. If you have any jobs in play, actual jobs to fill, and there are still some of them, they take your focus. We need revenue. And don't worry about your commissions, because you're probably not going to get them. Your company needs the revenue to extend its runway of survival. The main job of, as I've said to many owners of recruitment companies, is your job is to make sure you survive this with the fabric and structure of your business in place so that you can take advantage of the upturn. All the stuff I'm talking about, upturn and recovery, is only relevant to those of you who are still in the industry at that time, right? So jobs in play, total focus. Then it's the pipeline. Yes, there are fewer jobs around. We know that. That's a truism. But you've got to take a methodical approach to searching for those jobs. You can't accept it. And that means doing the grunt work. Some examples. You've got your ATS. You go through every single client you've ever spoken to in the last 3 years and you make contact with them. It might be an email to start with. It might be an in-mail. It might be a little funky video that you do on your video. That'd be a great way to get their attention. It might be a straight out phone call. People are much more available, and the conversation you're going to have with them is, are you okay? How's it going? What's happening in your business? And you just spend a chunk of your day talking to every client you've ever dealt with. Then you talk to every candidate you've placed in a job in the last 5 years. Why not? Find them, chat to them. What's happening? They might be now in decisions of hiring. They might be looking for a job and have a great skill that you can build into a pipeline. Then call every candidate you didn't place in the last 5 years. Find them, have a chat to them. Then look at every company that you've had success with that you think will come back in the upturn. You've got to make some judgments about that. Research who their 5 biggest competitors are and start to engage with those people. And then, and this is a kind of a told you so moment, anyone who's ever listened to me before has heard me say you need, as a recruiter, to build your personal brand. You need to be active on social. You need to build your networks. Well, now is the time that it would pay off if you'd done it. So now is the time that you access your digital footprint, that you connect with those people on LinkedIn and Twitter and other places. And again, the message is there. It's in orange at the bottom. Your focus is constant, quality, outbound engagement. That's what you should be doing. Sure, the job's in place, also the pipeline, but then to build goodwill equity. And what I mean by that is, of course, we're hunting for jobs we can fill now. But if that's not available or only a minimum is available, then you are building equity for the future. You are connecting with people so that when the recovery comes, you are the obvious choice. That's why you can't afford to go and hide in your cave. You need to be visible. I call it goodwill equity because what it means is you build up through generosity, you build up a groundswell of equity. Equity means a share of an asset, right? And your asset is going to be people remember you and are grateful to you. So let's move on and talk a little bit about this. Part of that is you need to develop your chat. And what I mean by that is you need to build a narrative. I don't want you to get hold of clients and then immediately delve into, oh, how shit things are, and I put on weight and there's no work, and did you see what the idiot politician said last week, and all that negativity. That is not the direction you go. You develop a powerful narrative. I'm giving you my narrative now about the future. Right? That's what I believe. And it's hopefully helpful to you. When you come on this webinar, so you must have had some expectation. I hope I haven't. I'm not going to let you down, but you need to develop a powerful narrative for your clients and your candidates. Not just a puff piece about it, it'll all be fine in the future, but a point of view, a persuasive point of view. Have something valuable to say so they want to talk to you. Everyone's shocked, everyone's panicked, everyone's going through those 5 stages of grief. Here you come along with acceptance and a plan for the future. Avoid conversations that delve into self-pity. We don't need that, actually. And frankly, most of us on this call are better off than the vast majority of people around the world. So have a point of view that points the way. An example, I was talking to one of the companies I'm involved in. I'm the chairman of this company. It's in New Zealand. I was talking to one of the recruiters, and she was saying, you know, all our temps that we usually place, they're usually English and British travelers, right? Or people who've come for a couple of years. They're the people we put into our temp business support jobs. And the borders are closed. When this picks up, there's going to be no temps. So I said, turn that to your advantage. Come up with a narrative that when you talk to a permanent candidate who lost his or her job, that you'd have a narrative where, do you know, it might be valuable to contract for a year, just while the market settles. There's lots of temp jobs around, because there will be. So there's a narrative, and there's a narrative for the client, like, look, there's a huge shortage of temps. This job's for 6 months. Don't you think it might evolve into a permanent job? Should we look for a permanent people? All those people are going to dry up. There's going to be a race for the best talent, is your narrative, which will be true. And so you spark these positive comments, develop, excuse me, your narrative, your story. Have something useful to say. You know, you've got a point of view. If you haven't, develop one, research it. And so goodwill equity is about being visible and valuable. You know, I don't have this phrase, and when I was growing up, people often used to say, hey, Dad, what did you do in the war? It was almost a joke. What did you do in the war, Dad? And then you'd hear this story. Well, I like to say to you, in 6 months, a year, 5 years even, this period of time will go down in history, and people are going to say to you, hey, what did you do in COVID time? What did you do? And if your answer is, well, I made a lot of lists, I put on 8 kilograms, and I watched Breaking Bad 5 times, every single one of the 90 episodes. Good on you. What a great way to use this time. I'm being sarcastic. We need to be visible and valuable. Right? You're the CEO of your life. And CEO in this case means Chief Energy Officer. You're responsible for your own energy. This is the 15th webinar I've done in 15 days. Right? So I take responsibility for my own energy today and say, right, I'm going to give this 100% because there's value for people I hope. And people will remember those recruiters who reached out when the chips were down, who were supportive, who were there. I don't know if you're having this experience. I am when I'm dealing with companies, you know, my internet's not working, you know, whatever it is, travel companies. I had a lot of travel lined up. And I'm remembering those companies who are making my life difficult during this time, who are being unfair, who are gouging me during this time. And I will punish them as I can by not going back to them in the future. And I'm noting those companies who are being helpful, generous, reasonable, collaborative, visible. I'm getting a lot of emails from CEOs of companies telling me how worried they are about me. But when I call their company trying to get help, the person who answers the phone, if they ever answer the phone, is not being helpful. And that's how I'll judge them. And you will too. And you will be judged too. So Goodwill Equity is building up a groundswell of positive opinion about you that may not result, I should say, in revenue today, but will tomorrow. You've got to come up with your own ideas, right? You know, you guys have all these Zoom meetings all the time. Well, have one about building up Goodwill Equity. What are the things we're going to do? Here's 10 ideas. Invite someone to a virtual lunch, literally where you both have your lunch, add wine if appropriate, but you do take the initiative. Call candidates. Call all your candidates who've had their career opportunities whipped away from them. Reassure them that they won't be forgotten. Advise them on their resume. Go through their LinkedIn profile with them and give them an update on how they should make their profile sharp. By the way, make sure yours is, please. Maybe teach them how to do a video. Why not? That'd be helpful, that they could use that in their job search. VideoMyJob is standing by to help you on that. Call everyone on your ATS that you've ever spoken to with a simple opening line. Are you okay? How are you getting through this? Not about have you got jobs from it. Help candidates with their online brand, as I said. You write content. Help them write some content if necessary. Write some blogs. Start blogging. Now's a good time. Post it on LinkedIn. Share somebody else's social post. Offer an encouraging word. Just steer away from these snarky, negative stuff you see on social media all the time. It's cowardly and weak, and no one's going to give you equity for that. Add to some discussion on LinkedIn in a positive way. Give some real input. Connect some people. Encourage someone who is down. Introduce one connection to another connection. Call a client with some market news. I'm doing this all the time. I'm calling clients with some news, not confidential news, but hey, this is how other companies are handling it. Did you hear this good idea? I'm making lots of proactive calls to my clients just to give them some feedback. And it's not that I've got a meeting with them or anything. It's just, hey, here's an idea. What did you think about this? Return your messages. I get over 100 today and every day, and I try to return them all. If you're the one person I missed on, I'm really sorry, but I'm trying my best to return them all. Can't answer every question, but I try. So that's just 20 ideas of mine. But you can come up with 100 about, remember the phrase I used, let me go back to it. Constant, quality, outbound engagement. Constant quality outbound engagement. And not only that, you should measure it. I think now's the time for more measurement. You worry about KPIs and whatever, I don't care what you call them, but you should measure them. You should measure what, if I've got jobs in play, that's number one, got to close those. Then there's the pipeline. What are my activities there that are helping to generate business? And I gave you 5 ideas, you should come up with more. And then there's your third element, which is your Goodwill Equity, which is your generosity, your kindness, your contact with people, your sharing, your helping, and you could set yourself the goal of making whatever you like. It doesn't matter. I don't matter. You send out 10 positive emails a day and make 25 phone calls and 10 texts, whatever. Drop those numbers. Just have some goals that are outbound and positive. And not only will you pick up bits and pieces of work now, but you'll be building, I should say, this groundswell of positivity, which will be your equity for the future. Okay. So panic not tomorrow, because I know I've gone over time, but that's a perennial problem with me. I'm at the end now. If you are a recruiter and you'll come through this fantastically, but you've got to end up being an advocate for this job market and labor market's going to be completely disrupted. Clients are going to have over-pruned, they're going to let people go, they're going to cause resentment with some of their employer brands would have suffered. Of course, candidates are going to be lost in some cases, yet they're going to have good skills. You need to flip from being a transactional keyword spamming recruiter to an advocate for your clients, where you represent them and you can actually Get them candidates that wouldn't otherwise apply. And you act as an agent for your candidates where you represent them in the marketplace. Listen, that book is written of about 40 years of experience of doing this, right? Including 5 recessions. If there ever was a time for you to splash out 25 bucks or whatever it is, now's the time. Get the book, read it. As Tamara said, this is not a commercial thing. Every dollar that comes to me from this book, I'm donating to the Bushfire Fund. I want you to read it because it will help you as a recruiter. So you go to my site, there's this thing there that says buy the book or the Savage book. Go on there and buy the book, read it. And there are 2 or 3 chapters on recessions and how to get through them. And there are a lot of chapters on how to build Goodwill Equity. There's a chapter on that very thing in there, and the skills you need to thrive going forward. Tamara, that is me. I am willing to answer some questions if there are any.
Thanks, Greg. We do have a few. One of our attendees, who has remained anonymous, asks whether you think that all permanent recruiters should be learning how to recruit for temporary or contract positions.
Yeah, very easy question. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. They are specialized roles, and I do not encourage a perm recruiter to dilute their skills by dabbling in temp. It might be that as a permanent recruiter, you feel now is time for a pivot and you're going to move into temp, and that's going to be your career. I think very, very hard about that. But the perm market will come back too in time, right? So, and it'll come back immediately a little bit, and then it's just a matter of timing. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Tomorrow is definitely my advice. Do not sully your focus by trying to do both, firstly, and secondly, don't jump into the lifeboat of temp just because it might be the flavor of the month for 6 months or so. Okay, so and remember to follow your passion and what you love doing, because they're very different roles. And I didn't talk about that in detail today, but there are different jobs. There are obviously some common skills, but they're very different jobs. So no, I don't think now's the time for every permanent recruiter to do that. I think you should take a longer term view than that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Greg. Looking at a long term view, not jumping ship. One of the other questions we have is actually from an in-house recruiter. So they're obviously concerned with the hiring freeze, that their job is basically going to be made redundant, that they're next on the chopping block. Do you think that a lot of your advice is applicable for in-house recruiters? Is there anything that you'd change for an in-house talent team?
Well, first of all, and this is not meant to be disrespectful, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about in-house recruiters because it's not my market. But I'll give you some thoughts right now. I think a lot of what I said is very much applicable. And I think your questioner there should be a little concerned. On the other hand, when the thing turns, good internal recruiters will also have the opportunity to thrive. But they've got to add value as that's needed at that time. So my advice to that person would be to try and predict what's going to be needed for the next 6 months, exactly as I said for agency recruiters, and then how that person is going to thrive when the wheel turns. Now would be the time. This is going to sound like self-interested advice. It's not. Now would be the time to build really strong relationships with very good recruiters who are going to be there for the long term. A lot of internal recruiters miss the boat when they think that their job is to block recruiters. They actually need to build stronger relationships with smaller numbers of recruiters, so that when the moment comes and talent is short, that they can get an advantage. So I would say, just thinking about what I've said here, 50 to 80% of it is just as relevant to in-house recruiters, and they should think about how to adapt my advice to their own situation, which, as I say, I don't give a lot of thought to, frankly.
Yeah. And Samara has asked, it's Kim. She says that they know that a lot of their clients are briefing multiple agencies and trying to get the best price. Do you have an opinion on discounting, I guess, during this pandemic?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Please go to my blog and search up the articles on exclusivity and also on fee negotiation. I think this is going to sound like I'm walking a tightrope, because I am. Your first point is to try and sell your value and to try and sell why holding your fee and your client getting a top quality service is the better way to go, which it almost universally is. On the other hand, there is no doubt that clients will be defaulting to price in a crisis because they're all trying to cut their costs. So I would say the balance is you might have to cut your costs, your fee a little to win the work, but don't give it away. Don't give the farm away. Don't, rather walk away from business if it gets ridiculous. Always go back to the value you provide. Always try to prove to the client that if they give the job, particularly if they're going to give the job to 6 agencies, that is a foolhardy thing to do, which will result in lower service and less caliber candidates. Having said that, I do understand that this is almost a unique time, and you may have to, just as every other service provider is, look at your cost structure. But whatever you do, don't commit to it long term. It's just for this interim period, because the wheel will turn and we'll be back in vogue. The sun is going to shine on our industry one day again, and it's going to be fabulous, but you've got to be there to take advantage of that.
I've got another question from Kylie, who is building a sort of a cold or a newly established desk. She said, I guess she doesn't have an existing pipeline to pump. What of your advice is relevant to someone who's trying to build their desk profile or actually build a pipeline from scratch in this time?
So Kylie, it's the good news and the bad news. And the bad news is this is a shit fucking time to be doing what you're doing. Okay, so I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There's sometimes people think that some guy like me can come up with this, really cool thing that's going to solve the problem. But the good news is you're going to be hungry. You're going to be a fresh voice. You're going to look at it in an unbiased way. So whatever sector you're in, I would specialize. I would focus on a sector or a niche. Make sure that in your mind and with advice of other people that niche is at least still hiring. I mean, if the pond is empty, there's no point fishing, right? So don't fish in an empty pond. Find a pond where there at least are some fish, so you know they're there. Strangle that metaphor a bit, but you get my idea. And then make yourself as visible as you can. You still got to do exactly what I said before. You may not be able to go to a client list from before, but these days there's no end of ways of researching who is who in the zoo in your sector and then start engaging with them. It is a long, hard haul to be the new kid on the block in a downturn, but it can be done. And if you can get through this period, there are plenty of stories from my own experience, and other people have told me that they made their name in the downturn. So it's going to take significant resilience and a lot of rejection before you get there. I'm sorry, that would be the truth, though.
And Samara, she wants you to look in your crystal ball a bit, but also given that you are having lots of conversations with recruiters and across industries, she was just wondering whether you do see, which industries you see having new opportunities or bouncing back faster than others in this climate.
I don't know. Honestly, my take on that would be no better than anybody else's, really. I really don't know. And I haven't given it a tremendous amount of thought, but I think it's going to be like, for example, IT has held up pretty well during this period, and I imagine that will take off even more when we pick up as people start to invest back in getting their IT systems right to take advantage of more demand. But I really don't know. So I'm not going to, but the first rule I've learned about public speaking and doing stuff like this is stick to what you know. And I really haven't given that enough thought. I've been so busy just trying to help my clients get through this and configure the way we react to this that I haven't given a lot of thought to I think it's such a fluid situation. You would think, right, that, for example, the hospitality industry will will come roaring back once they open up the restaurants. Well, I had a conversation with somebody in that industry, not my client, but he was asking, and I said, why? He was asking, should I want to change from hospitality to something else? And I was like, why? It's going to come back. And he's like, well, it will come back, but it'll be, in his view, a fraction of what it was before. So that was interesting. You know, my simplistic view was, well, all the pubs and restaurants are closed, so they're going to open. Game on. He was like, no, it's going to be terrible. That was his view. So everything has a nuance, and I'm not close enough to all those industries to make that judgment.
Yeah, no, fair call. And that's it. And we're at about time, Greg. So thanks everyone for joining the conversation today. I will absolutely be sending out a recording this afternoon and links to all of the resources that Greg has mentioned. Oh, I got one last question. Let me just read it. So this is coming from a recruiter who's concerned that candidates and clients are being bombarded with phone calls, just checking in sort of phone calls now. I think you answered this in your webinar about defining your narrative. So how does a recruiter make their conversation different to the just "are you okay" conversation if that's what their clients are getting 20 of a day?
That's a fair question, and I think the answer, I alluded to it, but I'll expand on it. The first is, if you had built a strong online brand and were positioned in your niche as somebody with something useful to say, which you would have built up from years of doing what I've been asking recruiters to do, and what I can do now myself, because I've been doing it, you will be able to engage with people about subjects close to their heart because they will be reaching out to you. That's the first thing. I know it's too late to do anything about that, but please, as we come, one of the things you could do now is tidy up all your social presence, start to understand how content can drive inbound inquiries. That would be the first thing. But the second thing is about that narrative. While I did say, and in some cases it's true, that you can simply call up and say, "Are you okay?" And for a candidate who's been neglected, that might be a really nice call to get. In most other cases, or in many other cases, it's got to be a much more considered approach, where you've developed your narrative. Some of my clients are putting together webinars for their clients, so on very topical things. So their recruiters have got the opportunity to call them up and say, "Hey, we're doing a webinar on blah blah blah. Let me tell you what's." So there's a conversation, and it's offering something, and it's more meaty. So I think you've got to develop your narrative, and I would also think that the way you reach out to the client needs to be tailored. Is it an email with a carefully crafted message about why you'd like to have a conversation? Is it an email? Is it a straight call? Is it a text to a client you know pretty well, but just drop it to, "Hey Bob, just thought we could talk tomorrow at 3. I want to tell you what other people in your industry are doing." That'd be a smart thing to say. A crafted text to a client saying, "Do you have time tomorrow at 3? Because I've got something to share with you about what's happening in the sector." You obviously then got to have something to say, so it takes work. But I think the more you can craft it, the more you can build your narrative, the more you can add value, the more those conversations will be easier to both have and to initiate.
Great. And that was actually our last question. So thanks for your time today, Greg. Really appreciate it. And as I said, we'll be sharing the recording and resources this afternoon by email. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks again, Greg, and we'll see you at another webinar soon.
Thank you.